Good morning, I'm Saini at the University of Canberra. I'm in my weekly conversation with Michelle Grattan about politics in Australia. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Deep.
Michelle, an election is coming in May, and it is fascinating what people begin to believe in when an election is near. And I'm referring to Scott Morrison's announcement that the government would be putting in $2 billion more to extend the direct action program of the Abbott government on climate change. And as you know very well, that the record of this government on climate change has been questioned, and it is not perceived to be very positive. What do you make of this effort that comes across as an effort to burnish the image of the government on climate change before the election?
I think that the government had to do something. It's not, of course, got a comprehensive energy climate policy, and that's still a huge gap. So it's used the direct action approach to say, okay, we're going to do more abatement, and this will take us over the next few years and will help us get to the targets that we've set for Paris. It's also announced that it's taking more equity, or putting equity into pumped hydro, the Snowy scheme. So it's trying to come across as a government that is doing something, even though in fact, of course, it lacks the comprehensive policy that's needed to reassure investors and to really get the energy sector moving in a constructive manner.
So in the absence of a comprehensive policy, as you mentioned, do you think the people are going to buy it?
I think that some people will be reassured that action's been taken, but for those who regard climate as a vote-changing issue, I don't think they will be satisfied. Of course, the other part of the government's approach in this area is to say that Labor's much more ambitious policy would drive up power prices, end up with the lights turned out, and so on. So the other side of the coin is a fear campaign about Labor, but from the government's end, it's got some positives, but I don't think enough to convince those who think this is a really important issue. And of course, they're including many young voters.
Now, speaking of elections, you have been involved in research by the University of Canberra researchers into the electorate of Warringah. That's where former Prime Minister Tony Abbott is running, and Sally Stagel is challenging him. She's a very high-profile candidate. You have some interesting findings from your research. Would you like to share those with us?
It is interesting. What that research found was that Tony Abbott has really lost quite a lot of skin among his constituents, and especially over the same-sex marriage issue. Now, that plebiscite was quite a while ago, but people remember it, and there were 4 focus groups in the research, and it came up across the board with people saying he doesn't represent our views. He didn't represent our views on this. Of course, 3/4 of the voters in that seat supported the same-sex marriage change, and Tony Abbott was out there campaigning against it. More generally, I think that some people there see him as a divisive figure who's done damage to the Liberal Party. On the other hand, his local record, he's very high profile, of course, firefighting, life-saving, so on, and also standing up for local causes. That local record is standing him in quite good stead. It's interesting that you mentioned that Sally Stagel is high profile, and that is very true nationally. But what came across in the group discussions was that she hasn't really penetrated in the electorate. She's born and bred local, but nevertheless she's not seen as a local figure, a local activist by most of the people in these discussions. They are small groups, and we have to put qualifications around focus group research. It's not predictive, but it does tap into general attitudes, and what it tells us is that at this stage, this quote high profile, unquote challenger, has to raise her profile locally so that people see her as someone they think will deliver for them. It's an interesting contrast to, say, Wentworth, where Kerryn Phelps, who won that seat at the by-election, was so much better known locally as well as, of course, nationally.
Well, you'll be continuing these kind of pieces of research, and we look forward to hearing more about those in these conversations. But let me return to the bigger national issues. The appointment of Ita Buttrose as the chair of ABC, no doubt she has a stellar record as a media figure, a journalist, and on multiple platforms. Truly respected figure in Australia, but it is a bit of a left field appointment. She wasn't even in the list of the independent panel that was looking at this appointment. The appointment did come as a surprise. What is your review of that appointment?
As you say, the process was once again ignored. The government gets a shortlist from an independent panel and more often than not just throws that out, so maybe that process isn't worth paying for even. But I think in this case what's happened is very positive. I think that she stacks up better than the people who were on that list. I think that she'll be popular across the board, and while Labor is objecting to the process being ignored, I don't think it can really object to the outcome of this decision. I think that she'll be good.
Yeah. What do you think is one thing, big thing that she has to deliver to the nation?
She's got to defend the ABC in torrid times. It's an institution that's always under criticism, almost whatever the government, but certainly under this government, has been very much in the firing line. But there's no one thing she has to do. She has to do multiple things, really. She has to make sure that the broadcaster, the national broadcaster, is positioned in the best way to use its resources, and their vast resources from the taxpayer, to deliver both to a popular market and to more upmarket audiences, specialist audiences. So it has challenges that are very special to being a national broadcaster.
Let's finish with probably the biggest story of the week, and a sad one. That is the conviction of Cardinal Pell for sex offences against young boys. Quite aside from the conviction itself, it has generated a national debate which at times has been rather unsavory. High-profile figures have been involved in it, including 2 former prime ministers and other high-profile figures. Can you dissect it for us and try to make sense of this very difficult situation that the country is going through? And I imagine this is a difficult period for the Catholic community in the country, and of course it is a difficult period for the whole country as such.
It comes against the background, of course, of the Royal Commission into child sex abuse in institutions and the horrific evidence that came out of that, and the very deep feelings that this produced in the community, in the institutions, of course among victims of this misbehaviour. So that's the background, and the specifics. Well, we're seeing a case against a person who was not just the highest figure in the Australian Church, but was very, very high in the Vatican. So to have this conviction is really shocking for the Church and for so many individuals in it. Now, there is an appeal, and we should put it in that context, so we don't know the end of this story, but what we've seen is a great deal of dispute about whether the jury got it right or wrong, and this is among eminent legal practitioners, not just ordinary people. And we've seen the barrister for Cardinal Pell having to apologise for some language he used in the court, quite extraordinary that would happen, and we have seen so much public engagement, in some cases quite ugly public engagement, in terms of the abuse that was hurled at Pell when he was going in and out of the courtroom. It is a quite extraordinary, unprecedented case, I think, in Australian legal history, and certainly, of course, in the Church's history.
Extraordinary it is, and it's not over yet with the appeal going ahead. I believe we'll be hearing a lot more of it and probably talking again here.
Well, yes, it'll go on for quite a while.
Well, thank you, Michelle. You have a nice weekend, and we'll meet again next week.
Thanks, Steve.